Here's an idea. Millennials have ruined everything as an attempt to escape the past. In case you haven't heard the news, according to Google Autocomplete, which is populated by likely search terms, millennials are poor, dumb idiots. We're stupid, rude, lazy, and obsessed with side hustles, which seems contradictory. We've also killed crowdfunding the Olympics and cereal, as well as Suits running the American dream, soap, diamonds, home ownership, the investment industry, and the McRap, which, let's be honest, all of those are just different parts of the American dream. For a bunch of poor, dumb idiots, we sure can do a lot of damage. For comparison, at least baby boomers, our parents, are the worst. Though I wouldn't be surprised if those results autocomplete that way because millennials ruined them. And the silent generation, our grandparents, are, oh, how appropriate. Boiling an entire generation of people down into one neat little set of descriptors or pinning upon them the responsibility for the failure of some industry or fast food item is absurd. It's also worth pointing out that at any given time there could be upwards of 6 generations currently living, and while sure one may dominate the headlines, we should be wary when that same generation is unilaterally condemned for some such calamity. But either way, it happens, and in our current clickbait dystopia, it happens to millennials a lot. Maybe because since we're narcissistic, we're obsessed with what people are saying about us, so we'll click on whatever calls us out. And because as we work through our hit list of industries, olds want to know what segment of the capitalist utopia we're gunning for next. Psst, it's vacations. The reason why will blow your mind. As a generation, millennials are an exceptionally economically viable scapegoat for the internet outrage. Publishing, the internet publishing industry. Publishing, as it turns out, is actually something we're pretty good at. How convenient. It's probably because we don't have interior lives and document all of our experiences using technology, never actually living in the I can't do it. I just can't do it. Either way, the important thing to note is that millennials kill industries. Industries don't die, and so there's a sense that some terrible fate is avoidable until the kids show up. Blaming younger generations for ruining things is nothing new. The youngins have always been derided for their noisy music and disrespecting their elders. Except our music is noise, and to hear some people describe us, disrespect is practically our way of life, so here's what I wanna do. I wanna accept this silly premise that millennials are lazy ruiners of things who never wanna grow up, and I wanna talk, on the complainer's own terms, about why that might be the case. And to do that, first, we're gonna talk about how generations work. And just as a really brief aside, we are taking a different tact here from Adam Conover, who recently ruined millennials.
And the fact is that generations in general don't exist. We made them up.
Generations are not naturally occurring, true, but social divisions are nonetheless really powerful. To understand how that power functions, as I mentioned, we're accepting the angry gray hairs millennial premise in order to question it. And if you haven't seen Adam's talk, you should. It's great. Okay, on to how generations work. Which, okay, right off the bat, this seems very easy. A generation is a group of people roughly the same age. But stop the presses, not just because the presses are no longer an economically viable method for mass communication in the post-millennial apocalypse, but also because I'm closer in age to many Gen Xers than young millennials whose outlook I share. So is that it? Similar age, similar outlook? Well, no. We wouldn't say that someone my age who thinks that technology is ruining our humanity isn't in the same generation as me, so what's the answer here? Well, I'm glad you asked. German sociologist Karl Mannheim wrote in 1927 about this, the problem of generations, in an essay by the same name. He says, okay, you got a group of people born around the same time, and that's a generation. Sure, that's how most people think of generations, but as we've just seen, it's useless. So within a generation, Mannheim says you also have these two other groups. You have an actual generation, which are people who experience the same social and historical problems, and within that, generation units, groups within the same actual generation who work up the material of their common experiences in different and specific ways. So while me and a 30-something construction worker from Hunan may be in the same generation, we could be in different actual generations if we haven't experienced the same social and historical problems, which probably we haven't. This is also why, though we're close in age, I'm not a Gen Xer. Different problems. Me and Straw Mike are in the same actual generation, but different generation units because he works up the material of his experiences differently and has a very different outlook from mine. You call these online jerks friends? You haven't even met them. Ah, buddy, don't ever change because we need you to keep saying stuff like this for the show. Mannheim says an important part of this whole process, how we relate within and between generations and what generations do, has to do with our memories. The experiences you have when you're young have a big impact on who you turn out to be, duh, but they also help you identify with people who share those memories. This is why there's a difference between generations and actual generations, the members of which have similar personally acquired memories and can therefore relate to one another. Mannheim also writes about appropriated memories, what we may know or remember from previous generations, knowledge of the world which is just kind of like in the ether. Millennials may have personal memories of the global economic collapse and 9/11, but appropriated memories of Pearl Harbor or the moon landing, and here is where things get weird, and also where we return to why we, millennials, are awful. Spoiler alert, it's not our fault, because nothing is our fault. Hashtag no responsibility, hashtag lazy, hashtag Teflon generation, hashtag selfie. So, if actual generations cohere because of a shared understanding of the world informed by shared, personally acquired memories, what does it mean when memories are increasingly mediated? Mannheim was writing decades before global pop culture existed, but starting with the end of the silent generation and up to now, there's only ever been an increasing prevalence of media as part and parcel with a normal experience of modern life, especially as children. Books, radio, music, television, movies, news, video games, media, and media objects organize and contribute to our memory and understanding of our social historical moment. The longer this is the case, the more each generation will have access in some form to the social historical moment of previous generations. So what I wonder is if this makes the line between personally acquired memory and appropriated memory blurry somehow. I'm not saying that we remember things that didn't happen to us because we can watch Looney Tunes, All in the Family, or news reports from the 70s. What I am saying is that many a millennial's personally acquired childhood memories largely concern media. So if memories concern media, and media informs memory, and memory relates a generation, it's worth asking if that media has to be of that generation only. I wonder if the availability of previous generations' media contributes to the shared millennial memory and therefore outlook, and if that has something to do with us being whiny brats who ruin everything. I think it could. First, the industry which produces that media you have awesome memories of has to figure out how to stay afloat. There are lots of different ways for doing that, but one common tactic for maintaining relevancy is an emphasis on youth culture. Increasingly popular culture is youth culture, and arguably millennials and Gen Xers were the first two generations to be born into a widespread equivalency between popular culture and youth culture. We have been shown with gusto that music, fashion, celebrity, art, technology, progress itself is driven by young people. Children have always been our future, but in the interest of a relevant media ecosystem, they must also be the present. Would it be a shock then that some portion of millennials would be hesitant to become adults? To willingly engage with actions and lifestyles which symbolize adulthood and therefore insignificance, the death of impactfulness? Which brings us second to that which millennials hath killed. The importance of generations and having differences between them, Mannheim explains, is that new perspectives urge progress. What one generation sees as natural, the next generation sees critically. The continuous emergence of new human beings teaches us both to forget that which is no longer useful and to covet that which is yet to be won, he wrote. What is it that's being forgotten here? And what does it mean to forget? Forgetting attitudes, opinions, and habits is one thing, but forgetting ever-present media messages, literal infrastructure, industry, and entrenched institutions, cultural, economic, political, educational, that is another thing. For millennials, more than any previous generation, I think the world is a database of what exactly has been done. All the accomplishments of the generations before us stand in authoritative repose. We can even know how those accomplishments were made, and in many cases the optimal, recommended, expected pathways for repeating them. Insofar as it's the job of a new generation to covet that which is yet to be won, millennials may stand in front of a crowded trophy case, blah, 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 joke about participation trophies here, to make room. As a generation, millennials sorta can't just forget what's standing in front of us. We have to destroy it in order to make room for our own accomplishments. For millennials to kill industries, ruin products, let brands, companies, businesses, symbols of success, progress, or hard work die, that isn't just laziness, narcissism, or stupidity, It's a radical act of forgetfulness, trying to make room in the crowded landscape for a foundation on which to construct our own success. And if vacations, designer bags, or the McWrap suffer in the process, well then so be it. What do y'all think? Why did millennials ruin everything? Let us know in the comments and I'll respond to some of them in next week's comment response video. There is no comment response video this week for last week's episode about Borges and Pierre Menard, author of the Quixote, but there is a new prep thread on the subreddit for the next thing we're reading for the Idea Channel Book Club, which is another Borges short story called The Library of Babel. It's a great one. There's already really awesome supplementary material and additional reading and already an awesome conversation in the thread. We are going to be discussing that short story on the subreddit in 2 weeks. So yeah, check out that thread. Lots of great stuff there. Very excited. Special thanks to Vanessa Hill from Braincraft for inspiring this week's episode about millennials when she sent me story after story about all of the things that millennials had killed. We have a Facebook and IRC and a subreddit links in the doobly-doo, and the tweet of the week comes from us, actually. We are in the throes of figuring out what the next Idea Channel t-shirt is going to be, and I think there might be a sort of tournament-style voting thing that happens, and right now we're talking about whether or not we're gonna go with, I pronounce it Jife, possibly spelled out with IPA, or Jife for life. So if you want to vote on that Twitter poll, we'll put a link to that in the doobly-doo too. And last but certainly not least, this week's episode would not have been possible or good without the very hard work of these ruiners of everything, except for this episode and previous episodes.